Hiya, Dave here. Just wanted to give you guys a video of the pump that I made, the Henderson pump. Some of the guys on the forum have made them, and I've copied a few guys' designs and just sort of took in the best bits for myself, really. I made a couple of errors making this pump, a couple of trial and errors really. I tried to make my own valve to begin with, which didn't work. So on the forum, a guy called Lanatech suggested joker valves, which are these. Come a bit closer. Which are these black valves, the black rubber valves. Again, they're one-way valves. They're quite a soft rubber as well. Strong but soft and malleable, and they open up obviously. Back pressure closes them quite tight, and it's actually quite a decent seal. If you see that, it's actually quite tight. So two of those valves, the link to get those are on the forum. And then just make a normal Henderson pump. I made mine out of 50mm pipe simply because a lot of the parts that I can get were 50mm pipe rather than, you know, taking like normal 68mm ducting and trying to change it. It's just try to step it down and stuff that I didn't feel like gave me the right kind of seals to make the unit. So I've just made it with a normal with a 50mm pipe really, which can be had at your not screw fix, which can be had at your like plumb store and stuff. B&Q and that sell 50mm pipe like this, but they don't sell the 50mm T-sections like this, which is really what I'm kind of looking for, and a little stepper down to go to the 40mm. So basically, a couple of the points that I struggled on to begin with were these valves themselves kept blowing through with the extreme pressures of the actual water that was coming in to it. So what I've had to do is, if you come a bit closer, man, what I've had to do is strengthen up the inside diameter of the pipe, so that the lip that's going around the actual valve actually sits flush against it and actually takes up the entire width of that collar. If not, it does have a tendency just to blow through with the pressures of the pump. So a simple T-piece, I mean the T-piece as well, I've got mine in a very particular fashion. A lot of guys will see it, you know, they put the T-piece this way, which when you're pumping out, when you're pushing down, when you pump out, it's got to almost come back on itself to get out of the hose, which really isn't efficient as well, because obviously gravity's trying to push the sand out. So I pushed it that way, which if you can see it's going down and it kind of slices through it a little bit easier, and the gravel actually wants to fall out of it straight away. So that's the pump there. So what I've got is obviously the intake valve, which this is the intake valve. Obviously I've strengthened all of the inside, all the inside of all the edges, and all I've done is take another piece of 50mm piping and simply cut it down slightly, and then put it in, and then, you know, snip the piece out of it to make the inside collar you know, smaller diameter, so rather than getting the exact amount of pipe. And I'm just using the pipe glue, like whatever all the guys use. Smells like acetone. It actually melts it and is actually quite a strong unit. So pop the valves in, obviously push them right down to the collar, get yourself a good seal going there, and that's probably one of the most important things with these valves, creating good seals. If you didn't have a watertight seal, it really isn't going to work. It's going to start drawing in air and stuff like that, and when you push down to try and push the water out of it, the water will be coming out of you as well. So a good seal is absolutely a must, and also the reinforcing the edges which these rubber grommets sit against, because so many times when I took it out to actually test it, the valve just started collapsing on the inside of the actual pump itself. So obviously that's the intake valve, this is the outlet valve, opposite direction obviously. Again, fully supported on the inside of that edge, that little T-section there, so it doesn't collapse in on itself. So basically just push the valve into it, and then obviously you just got to arrange your outlet valve. So this is the outlet valve that I had. So again, it's a 50mm pipe reinforced on the edge, so that both those edges of the valve is actually supported. Duct tape, brilliant for taking up the small gaps around the pipe. Nothing can beat it. I mean, water doesn't get out at all. Obviously the idea is I've got a 40mm, so it's a 50mm down to a 40, a stepper. that I've had to use. I've kind of had to, I didn't get one that fitted inside the 50 actually, so I had to use another pipe and just sort of strengthen it that way. Obviously that has to be quite large because that valve is going to be opening up inside there, so it has to have enough room to actually open up to let the material come out of it. So again, all you're doing is just pushing it right down, lining it up, and then obviously you're just going to be using 2 screws. I have got screws, but I'm not doing them for the purpose of this because it'll just take too long. So that's that valve in. You'll probably see inside there, that's one valve done. And then obviously what we've got for different sections is just the actual stepper itself, which again is just a 40 to a 50 to a 40 mil pipe section. Again, the same thing. It's just stepped down. It's using duct tape to take up the seal and create yourself a good seal. Make sure they're all quite flush. And then what I've got is, if you look down here, Molly, I've got a selection of nozzles really. And the nozzles can just fit straight into the pipe here. If you look at that, I mean, you know, you can just slide different types of nozzles in for the job that's required. There's just like a gravel one for a lot of material, and it's got a filter on it as well, just a little bit wire. I just drilled 4 holes and put some wire on it, and I put a chamfer on it, and I'll explain why in a second. Crevice one's just exactly the same pipe, heated up over the cooker, and just flattened it with a chopping board, the wife's chopping board. And then obviously maybe just longer versions as well, because sometimes the crevices you're going into can be quite deep. So just a selection of hoses really.
Those two look like a hoop.
So just a selection of hoses really. Now the reason I've put a chamfer on it, and on this little one here I've actually drilled some holes in it and did the same thing. I put you know, a sort of grader in there as well, which is stopping the bigger stones from going up in it. These are quite tricky actually, because one of the problems I find try to soak the material up from the riverbed was if you create a vacuum and you don't actually have enough water going into your pump, it blocks. And anybody's pump will block, not just this one. You've got to almost create a slurry of water, enough water to go in to keep the material moving. If all you're doing is put that directly into gravel, if you sink that directly into gravel and soak on it, there's no water to actually create a slurry and soak the water up as well. So having it chamfered, you know, 9 times out of 10 when you're putting it in the riverbed, it won't always be maybe tight to the gravel or whatever. There's always be a space for water to ingress in, which is helping the actual suction power and actually removing the material for the river. So I mean, basically that is the pump quite simply put together. Obviously, again, you can remove it and just use it as a normal Henderson pump, albhough albeit a 50 mil one, a little bit smaller. But that is essentially the pump. Out the edge, this is the outlet pipe. I forgot another section. It's just simply the same diameter but with a smaller section on it, so that I can attach the pipe to it. So what I've got is I've just got a pipe that goes onto that there with a simple Jubilee pipe, and that pumps into a bucket, which is pretty much a copy of the golden sand bucket, to be honest. It's got 2 holes in it to let water out, and it's got a sealed lid, and it does the job perfectly. The reason I went for the rigid hose was simply I did buy the flat pipe hose, the lay flat hose, which is great for packing away and carrying, but the problem with that hose is it wants to fold on you all the time, and it wants to close, so really isn't a good hose we need to go for. It just doesn't want to stay open and move the material. Another point is, if you got your pump and you've made it and you're trying to test it in a bucket, you always have to test it with the hose connected. And the reason for that is quite simple. When you go to soak the material up and you push the material out, the material that's coming out of the hose, when you go to soak back up again, there's nothing to push against that valve and blow any smaller bits of grit that will sit in those joker valves and force them closed. This pump didn't work initially, and I couldn't figure out why. And what happened was, when I put the hose on it, because the water was residing in the pipe, when I soaked up to soak the material back into the pipe, the water obviously initially tried to come back in the actual outlet valve, and as soon as it hit the outlet valve, it blew out the little bits of stones and closed the valve. The valve's never blocked on me with the hose connected. If I take the hose off, it wants to block, because there's no water resistance and water flow coming back in here. You'll soak water through it fine, material you won't. So so that's obviously a little trick if you want to test it, if you think it's not working. And also, you know, I've only got like what, 6 feet of hose on here as well. If you go for too much hose, you're pumping against too large a force, and you'll never, one, you'll exhaust yourself doing it, and two, you'll actually spend you won't actually beat the force of it. It'll be too hard to push up or down the river. So a nice decent amount of hose, which is enough to let you move the bucket around the river and actually fill your bucket, is actually quite fine, to be honest. So that's my pump. If you guys have got any suggestions how to better it, I'd love to hear it. But apart from that, hope you copy it, hope you like it.